on time. So welcome. And here at the center, we start with a spiritual mind treatment. So just relax into your seat. And I know that in this place, in this space, there is only one. There is that divine presence, that power that is wisdom, creativity, love, harmony, the presence and power of the divine that fills all things, knows all things, and supports us in all of our creative endeavors. This presence, this power is who I am. It is who each one of us is. It is that life within us that expresses in each one of us. And I know tonight, as we come here to learn about the creative process and Thomas Troward, that we are blessed with open communication and open hearts, learning what we need to know, what we are curious about. It is a wonderful experience for everyone here. And I'm so grateful for this time, for this wonderful book, for the chance to explore the varied interpretations that each of us have within the one. I'm grateful for this time. And as I know the perfection of each moment, I just release my word into the law and know that it is already done, and so it is.
And so it is.
So welcome. What I like to do is just do quick introductions, just would like your name and something positive that happened today or recently with you. So I'm Laura, practitioner here, and I will be teaching the course with Kate for the next 8 weeks.
Yes.
And today I had a wonderful quiet time at home, happy cats, and a nice long bath. That's my positive day.
Debbie Ivy, and I went to my most amazing, fabulous chiropractor this morning, so that's always a perfect way to start the day. And yeah, I worked on some science of mind stuff for the rest of the day, so it's just been a lovely day.
Great.
Yeah.
And I'm Kate Wagner. I'm also a practitioner, and I'm the other half of this presentation group. And today I started my day with physical therapy and with a neck massage and manipulation, and that was wonderful. And then I put together stuff for this class, and it was good.
Great.
I'm Deb Thompson, and the best thing that happened to me today was that I had a wonderful conversation with my daughter, updating on my grandchildren and what they're doing and how they're progressing along, and it was very satisfactory.
Great.
Oh,
Hello, my name's AJ Prodell. Had a good day today. My truck was running, was in the shop yesterday. So it was nice to get in at 5:30 and crank it up and be able to. That was a good productive day at work. Just we've had some nice days, seeing the blue sky and some sunshine, which does amazing things. And yeah, it's just good.
Breezy, and I was cleaning off my desk.
That's what's a good
and that was a good thing?
Hi, I'm Tim, and I'm also a practitioner here. And today was a happy day, special day, because it was my last fortnighting. Not making it happy, but it was a significant, wonderful, positive thing. I've been on the board for 6 years, and today was the last board meeting. And next board meeting we'll have a new board member. So anyway, it's been exciting. It's been great, and yay!
Completions are good.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go over some basic stuff. This curriculum is from the main office for CSL, and we have some stuff in here. If you'll open it, we've got a student agreement, and to receive credit for this class, you need to attend all the classes. You can miss 2 and still receive credit for this class. Under the student agreement, so class begins promptly at 7, and we need you to be here. But the homework and final exam, this class, the homework is I'd really like you to read the chapter, look at the questions, answer them if you can, because we'll probably go through them each week to discuss them. There aren't any papers or anything like that. The final exam will be in class. We'll discuss it all together, just to get a broad overview of what we learned in the course. On the next page, we have a personal contract. So this really has to do with participation and what you agree to, how you agree to show up in class. So we want you to participate, be here at 7. Keep the interactions in the class confidential. You know, don't disclose names or identities or other people's story unless they've given you permission. And it's okay to share what you learned in the course, but we want to keep other people's process confidential. Let's see. Agree to do all the sign work. That's mostly the reading. We don't have a journal for this class. And numbers 4 and 5 is you really want to be here with an open mind and be fully present. The open mind is being open to other people's interpretation and to new things that you can learn. And the only way that you can do that is if you're really fully present and paying attention. And we really appreciate sharing. I can tell you what I think about what's in the book, but it really enhances everybody's learning experience if you share your interpretation of what was in the book, because there are so many ways of seeing what's there that can open our minds. Not saying we're going to change the context and say what it was totally different, but there's little things that could come up that can make us each understand it a little deeper. So I really appreciate sharing. And let's see. So this is a supportive and loving community, and that's how we want to interact with each other, to be honest and truthful. And let's see, and if you have cell phones, this is one of my pet peeves. I either turn it off or turn it on mute. And like in the sanctuary, they say, go ahead and text and share. No. In class, you're present. There's no social media thing, no texting. If you're expecting a call from the doctor, yeah, you check, but still keep on vibrate. But class is class. So that, please do that for me. Okay. Any questions about that?
And show up on time, right?
Yes. Yes.
You missed that part, I did. Right
Yeah.
there.
That's on page 2.
So they also put in here on page 3 about sharing. It's really interesting to know why we share. It's so we can acknowledge people's wins and celebrate with them, recognize them, give them an opportunity to express, anything that might be a challenge in their life and be able to move forward. And the other piece of sharing is that it allows the rest of us to develop a better ability to listen, because we really want to be fully present for anyone sharing. So like we said earlier, our sharing is confidential. And when you're sharing, just share with your truth. We're not here to rescue. We're not really here to comment on other people's sharing. So let any anyone who's talking, let them complete. And before saying anything, and don't do any crosstalk of what's going on. I tended to do that in the past because things would amuse me and I would have to say something. So if it amuses you, just kind of hold it until they're done talking, because it probably is not. What amused me didn't really match with what they were talking about. It just triggered, my mind wanders. So we want to just be respectful of each other. We also don't want to spend 10 minutes telling the whole story. We want to keep what we're talking about succinct to the point that we want to make. So to tell what you need to make the point, but if you get to the point where you're repeating yourself like I do sometimes, catch yourself, because we all heard it once. Okay. It says in here to share one time only at each class, but this was created out in Denver where they have Mile High and they have 200 people in a class. So it kind of makes sense there, but with our smaller classes, share when you have something relevant to talk about or you just need to get it out. Okay. So how do we support each other in our listening? It's by giving each other full attention. We want to be in a loving and compassionate state and make sure that we hear what they're saying. We're not off in a daze. We are actually, in here, I love this, we're giving a precious gift by listening to someone, supporting them when they have the courage to share. Don't judge it. And know that everyone is speaking from the divinity within themselves, and that it's here to just uplift all of us and give us all things to think about, new perspectives. And like I mentioned earlier, so it's be aware of the amount of class time that you share. If you are taking up half an hour, you might want to think about it. I'll stop you for them. So in this class,
Well, just real quick,
Oh,
going
sure.
back still on the sharing.
yes,
Do you want us to do, because here they have in caps, keep the sharing to 2 or 3 minutes for the guidelines for sharing?
normally that's what most of us don't talk more than 2 to 3 minutes, but if you're going on a long, long story, don't be surprised if I kind of go, and the point is. But in the really large classes, it's really, they've got to keep it on tap. But we have a nice small group here, so we might have more time to share. So don't be real concerned about sticking in there. That's my job. Anything else? Okay, so the materials for this class, we're going to be going through the creative process in the individual by Thomas Trauer, and we'll be going through the whole book, because I do want to talk about the last 2 chapters in the last class, even though they're not in the assignment. The Edinburgh lectures, they're referenced here and there in the creative process. It's a good reference book, but it's not required for the class. It's pretty simple there. And you'll see here we've got the calendar, so you have the reading schedule for each week. Kate and I will be taking turns facilitating the class. And tonight, we're going to be talking about the first 11 pages and a little bit about Thomas Trauer. Do you have any questions about the schedule?
I do have one quick question in regards to the last one. Is the class project the test, or is that something else?
There is no class project.
Okay.
It was a PDF and I couldn't change it.
Okay.
So we'll just be doing, talking about that conclusion chapter and a little bit of chapters 10 and 11, and probably going over that final exam, so we have that conclusion, that knowing that we actually got what we wanted to out of this class.
I have a question about what's on the board. In the first one, it you don't, there's not a hyphen after the word the, is there?
Yes, there is.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just,
Yeah.
you never know with these things.
So if you don't have the book, at this fulltextarchive.com, you can download the creative process or the Edinburgh lectures. And what I noticed is, it's not like somebody's retyped them. There's it looks like the pages will map to the pages that are on here for the creative process. So if you don't have the actual book, you can download this PDF. It's for free. I downloaded it, had no problem with it. No viruses, nothing.
Can I just make a statement? If you like to listen to your book rather than read it, or do both, the entire book is available on Amazon in
An audiobook?
a audiobook format.
Their Audible thing.
Yes, it's under Audible. And it's really cool to listen to it because it's spoken in British English, you know, because Troward was from England. So it's kind of interesting.
So that's pretty much the housekeeping. We'll talk and do things, we'll have a short break, talk again, and then we'll be done. We may go till 9, we may end up early, depends on how quickly we get through the material. I'm not real sure on the timing here, because this is the first time I've talked about it, so I don't know how long the class will go this evening. Because we're just really gonna talk a little about Thomas Troward and some of the, like an overview of what we're going through. Yeah, Tim?
Just a comment about on our confidentiality.
Yes.
Right now, this is being recorded. I'm not sure whether they'll post it or not. I would ask if anybody wants to share something and doesn't want it on, to let me know, and I will turn the camera off. So that way, you know, you feel free that it's not gonna be recorded. But it's recorded for teaching and for learning and editing. So that's just a confidentiality thing that I thought of, is that
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
if you've got something that's really personal, we'll shut the camera off.
It kind of blows the confidentiality thing, doesn't it, when it's going out over the web?
And I'm not sure
But
that
this
it will
stuff was
go out
written
over the web.
before
I don't know
that
that,
sort
but
of
the
stuff.
fact that it's been recorded is another issue, and you should be aware of that.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be posted or not, I didn't know it was gonna be recorded, so. All right, so any other questions on kind of housekeeping stuff? Any other, requirements you have about how we show up in class? Or how you want it to look?
Oh, I do have a quick question, just in regards to, are you teaching us the stuff before we answer the questions, or are we doing the reading and answering the questions before you teach this stuff?
Going forward, I would do the reading and answer the questions, because it'll be part of the discussion. And then you'll know, and you won't be trying to find it in the book.
Okay,
You'll have an idea.
okay.
Tonight, we didn't have it
Well,
where
of
we knew
course,
what to read. So I'm kind of winging it there. So,
It will make the discussions more participation. There'll be more participation if people have read it and have made notes, and then they can add to the discussion from the two of us. So it'll just make it better.
yeah. And, you know, it's Thomas Troward, so you might have questions about those really long sentences. All right, yeah. So what I want to talk about, there is a biography in here, a little bit about Troward. I'm not gonna read through it, but it was really interesting because, I mean, he was born in 1847 in India, in the Punjab, his British parents. So at 5, like they normally do, sent him back to England for his education. And he So he graduated from college at 18 with a gold medal honors in literature, which I think kind of makes it fits with him being able to write well, kind of his history. And he decided to study law, but he always considered himself an artist and a painter. I think it's interesting how we pick different things to become our job when our heart is somewhere else. It didn't stop him though, he still kept on with his art and painting. So then when he was 22, he went back to India, and they had a Indian civil service examination, which he took. And he became an assistant commissioner and was quickly promoted to a divisional judge in the Punjab. So he was there for 25 years, and the divisional judge in India at the time is similar to a trial court judge in America, so he had to make a lot of decisions at trial courts, I mean, even up to heavy-duty, serious felonies, so his understanding of law and people really came into effect by doing, this particular type of work. So he was married twice, his first wife in India, and I'm not sure if he married his second wife in India, I believe he did. He had 3 children with each wife, and his second wife actually helped publish some of his works after he passed. So he spent his 25 years there in the courts, but he wasn't only doing that. He was also learning a lot about the culture and the people. He had read all of the spiritual books in the area, the sacred text from the Oriental religions, and I think that is pretty obvious in what he has synthesized into his understanding of the science of mind. What I thought was very cool is how while he's there, he learned the languages. He could speak them, he could write them. He actually taught himself Sanskrit so he could study the Bhagavad Gita. And he did Bible studies in the original Hebrew. So this guy had spent his lifetime learning about the culture, learning about the sacred text, synthesizing all of these different viewpoints in these sacred texts. And I think it's not that I could do it because I never learned any other language, but to actually learn the languages and study the text in those languages, I think you get such a deeper feel for what you're learning. So after he retired, this was in 1902, he was only 55, that's when he moved back to England. And he devoted his time to 3 things. It was the study of the Bible. He was raised in the Church of England, so he was doing Bible studies from very young. And he also focused on his writing and his painting. It was interesting when I was looking things, so people described him as a kind and understanding man, simple and natural in manner, profound but somewhat tedious as a speaker. And I'm thinking that's that legal, logical stuff that people don't grasp onto as easy. He was considered very precise and a proper Englishman, but what I thought was funny is behind all of that, he was a practical joker. Mm-hmm. He liked to play practical jokes on his family, so it gives him a well-rounded feel for me. So shortly after he got back to England, he started writing for the New Thought Expressions publication. What I didn't tell you is when he took that civil service exam in India, they actually had a section on metaphysics. And he really impressed people with his original thought around it. So he was already attuned to a new way of thinking. So I think that spurred him to study all these texts. So when he got to England, he has all this time studying. He's already developed some of his philosophies around mental science. And he met Mrs. Alice Callow. I'm not sure exactly who she is, but she was a member of the Higher Thought Center, so she introduced him to that group. They were, very much into metaphysics and learning about the different views and religions, and they liked him, noticed that he was articulate and learned, and they had asked him to start giving a series of lectures with them. And so in 1904, he gave his Edinburgh lectures there. And it was, what I thought was funny is, the lectures were given to a very small but appreciative group, but it was said that even this group didn't really fully understand what he was talking about. So I'm thinking there's a lot in there, and that's part of reading this book, is you have to take your time to understand what he's saying. There was a philosopher at the time, William James, and he was an American philosopher and psychologist. He was the first educator to offer a course in psychology, kind of a leading 19th century thinker, and he characterized Troward's writing as far and away the ablest statement of philosophy I have met, beautiful in its sustained clearness of thought and style, a really classic statement. But this guy was a philosopher, so I already knew the style. Philosophers talk in logics, and that's what Troward does. He states his premises and leads to his conclusion. So he's doing like in logic, if A equals C and B equals C, then A equals B. So he had this philosophical way of logically getting to his point, which I think helped people find that path. It wasn't just out here, this is how it is. It was this leads to this, and we have this premise that he comes up with. I thought it was kind of funny the way someone else had described his writing, because they described it as a combination of intuitive Oriental mysticism filtered into a Western pedantic writing style. So I had to look up pedantic. So it's someone who is concerned with precision, formalism, accuracy, and minute details in order to make an arrogant and ostentatious show of learning. I don't think that Troward was making an arrogant or ostentatious show of learning, but based on a legal degree and all of this precision and all of these different religions, what he had learned, the sacred texts, I think he was very concerned about being precise. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that it wasn't arrogance and ostentation, that it just was this need to be precise and accurate, give the full details. I've heard a lot of people say that reading Troward is difficult. And looking at even this version of the text, there's more punctuation here than there was in his original writings. And if you've read any of it, one sentence can be a whole paragraph. So you have to take what he says line by line. And what I found when I was reading a paragraph, I still have one that I haven't figured out because it ends in a question mark, and I can't figure out where the question started. But you take what he's written, and I've had to read it a couple times and put the pauses in to find for myself where he's almost completed a thought before starting the next one. And they do go together, but you've got to take the time to really read it and look at it. So he's still, but he's still really clear and concise. You just have to get through a really, really long, complex sentence. They say here that the secret of understanding Troward is to understand his major premise, then how he logically argues from that premise. So that's kind of typical of the Western legal mind. It's that logic thing. And even when he starts here in the foreword, he's talking about the big picture and then breaks it down into all the individual parts to really put it into perspective. And when we read Troward, we have to put it in context of when he was alive. There's scientific jargon of the time, plus he, like I said, he was raised in the Church of England and read the Bible daily, so there's a definite Christian flavor to his writing. And those, for some people, that's a challenge. It would have been for me a few years ago, but I think there's a lot to, later on in the book, when we get to the last two chapters, there is a lot of stuff around Christianity, but if you look under it, it's still the basic premise of what he's talking about. So it kind of blends into where we can see that we're all going to the same place. So when I was looking at this, I really started thinking about his life. Everything that he did added to and built up to this place where he was able to start sharing this concept of science of mind. I mean, he's got the legal context and working with all these people, so learning their culture, learning their belief system, bringing it all into his own awareness to synthesize into what he's come up with here is amazing. I mean, he spoke a couple different languages. He even studied the royal yoga in India. I mean, he learned the difference between psychic powers claimed by some fakers and real mysticism. And I think that takes time. I mean, you've got to be really aware. I think his awareness comes through in his writing. He's pretty, well, I like him, obviously. It was interesting when I was looking at some things. I had taken a class on Troward last quarter, and the instructor was really into me. He said that, Ernest Holmes actually, when he was addressing a group of students in 1958, he stated that Judge Troward was fundamental to the New Thought movement. And he said he read every book that Troward had written, even the, what is it? I can't think of the name of it, where he had comments on the Psalms, which his wife published after he had died. And he just really fell in love with the man. And when Fenwick wrote about Ernest, he said the impact of Troward was one of the greatest and most exalted experiences in Ernest's whole life. So I can see, Holmes synthesized a lot to give us the Science of Mind text, but he took a lot from Troward. He even said in the Holmes paper too, about half my stuff comes from Troward. The other half came from wherever I could pick it up. What is left over I made up, because by then I knew it didn't matter who made it up, because it was all made up anyway. And I'm thinking, we all make it up. And I look and go, I'm so glad between Troward and Holmes that they made up a pretty good thing, that I don't have to go study all those other things to synthesize it. And that was part of Holmes' thing, is like, learn it from Troward, learn it from me, but make your own choice. decide what works for you, so that's part of the making it up part. Take what you want from each thing, and that's what you need to do with Troward. Know what resonates with you. You'll recognize a lot of it from the Science of Mind as well. There was one other quote from Living the Science of Mind. It said, Holmes, I consider Troward's writing to be the most profound spiritual abstractions of modern times. So he really based a lot of what he put into our Science of Mind on Troward. So we need to study Troward because he's, theoretical basis around a lot of our spiritual philosophy. And when we understand Troward, we can understand a big piece of the consciousness of Ernest Holmes. So, y'all got any questions about Troward? I know I was just talking on and on.
Good.
Yeah. And there's a little more in the booklet, a couple different things on him. But this was the part that was interesting to me. So, now we get into the book. So the creative process in the individual. This is Troward's, I want to say continuation, but it was after the Edinburgh lectures where he's expanding more on the creative process, giving us more detail. He's explaining the nature of creative action, beginning with the formation of the universe and ending with that infinite possibility when we break it into the individual creative process. And what I found with Troward, well, not found, but he relies on two big principles, or two main points. That principle's not bound by precedent, and the personal factor. The personal factor is something we'll discuss a lot more in a later class, but principle's not bound by precedent, I think, is pretty important. It's really how the creative process works. If it was always based on what was there, nothing new would happen. So you have to know that there's this underlying creative principle that brings us to the new. I'm gonna sit, because I want to ask y'all something. I want to kind of go into what y'all's definition is of principle. So what do you think principle is?
The basics, the foundation, how you are thinking, how you are believing, and the steps that lead you to that. So how you're going to direct your life, how you hope that you can stay true to your principles.
That's part of it. Okay. Anyone else?
It depends on context. It can be defined in a lot of different ways, so.
So if we're want to think about it in terms of universal spirit. So it's that, let's see. So it's the area of unlimited pure potential, that principle that is truth, that is potential. It's the underlying primary cause. I think principle, to me, part of principle is just my concept of the divine and what's possible. And if we're thinking in the context of what's possible with universal spirit and accessing this principle, how do you think we would access that?
By not being limited by what's already there. By just going further, stepping into that creative flow. Letting yourself just kind of meander about and see what you can come up with instead of just, being stuck on those main points, the main ideas, those principles that have already been set.
So is this in the place where you're opening up to spirit, new ideas? As some of us do it in meditation, just in silence. So to me, the principle is that truth, that guidance, that which can be new, and we open up to it when we open our minds and hearts to inspiration. Does that make sense?
Isn't it also partly the kind of the foundation upon which other things hinge? So like if you have a new idea, a new concept, and you're trying to bring something new into form, there are certain principles, there are certain laws that are going to affect whether or not you can move in that particular direction. You may be able to create something new, like, the people who created flight in the air. They took something that didn't exist and created the ability to do it, but they had to base it on laws that are unchangeable. So principle is that unchangeable part of the creative principle, creation, the ability to create. There are certain principles that are unchangeable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's in that process of creation. I think part of where Troward's looking at principle, it's first cause, it's the divine. And because he sees it in accessing that. Troward calls it worship. I'm trouble with that. But it's where you're connected with that divine. The principle is the potential. And there are certain laws out there, those are spiritual laws that govern. I think principle is that piece that brings in the new. Because the other piece of it is the precedent.
Mm-hmm.
So
So are you saying that he's saying the divine cannot be bound by precedent?
correct.
And neither can we.
If
I
you
think-
choose.
I think that would make sense because especially in this time, everything was so set. Whether it be in Buddhism or Hinduism or Christianity. I mean, there were ways to do things, and don't be stepping too far out of that line.
Well, there's still, we still have a lot of precedent, but if we base all of our decisions on precedent, then we don't have that creative spark to bring in something new. The precedent, that's that whole accumulated knowledge of humanity, everything that's happened before. And like Kate was saying, that can be what we build on. But we have to have that divine spark in principle that furnishes that idea that allows us to continue our development. Because, like Kate was alluding to, that Troward in the book talks about our ability to fly, aviation, where the law was always there, the ability was there, but we had to have the ideas to these things to eventually create. It was letting new ideas come in that built on what was already there, not taking and just repeating what was there. It's kind of allowing your mind to just come up with something new to be able to actually use the forces of nature that are there in new ways. That's the piece. I had a question on this too in here, because we talk about, but I'll go to that later. Okay. I just really wanted to talk about principle and precedent, because that's kind of a real cornerstone for Troward, that we can only create when we know that we're not bound by what's happened before or what we've known before.
When we're open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My throat hurts. I hope you don't mind, but I would like to take a short break and be back at 8. Thanks.
You're on.
We're back. So, yeah, RJ, I like what you were saying about our religious presence, what we learned growing up, that we're not bound by that. It's not just in our religion, it's in everything. We learn that things have to be a certain way, so we keep building on what we've already learned. We're not really creating something new. We have to allow that spark of the divine to come in that allows us to see that there can be a different way. And that it's realizing that every possibility is there, and learning how to align things and get them in the right order so that something new can be experienced, you know, because the laws of aerodynamics were always there, but we had to let that spark from spirit come in and not rely on that precedent. So there's a couple points that I want to start with the universal creative process. So this was the divine creating. Troward says that it's where it's a projection. So the divine projects and creates out of itself, where in science of mind it's an emanation. And that creative process started where spirit projected, and we got the planets in the solar system. And with Troward, he believes in a 5-kingdom process. We don't really go over that too much in here, but I think it's important to understanding the creative process and where he sees it. Because that the way that Troward describes these 5 kingdoms, he starts with the mineral kingdom. So this is, you know, the rocks, the planets, everything that is the mineral. This is the basic building block. And it's an energy intelligence in this basic building block. And then the next level, we get to the plant kingdom. The plants are a new expression of life dependent on the mineral kingdom. We go from the plant kingdom into the animal kingdom, which is interdependent with the other 2. So they're all interdependent as they grow. I think it's along, you know, this normal evolution process, but with Troward it's these 5 different kingdoms. So we've got to the 3rd kingdom, which is the animal kingdom, dependent on the plants and the minerals for subsistence. And then we move into the human consciousness kingdom, and we are the energy and intelligence, you know, vibrating as self-conscious humans. We're still dependent interdependent with the other realms. And where the creative process comes in is moving to this fifth kingdom that he defines as it's the divine kingdom. It's the energy intelligence of the divine, where we're reaching into that oneness, coming into that divine kingdom of oneness with God, and it's kind of participating consciously in this evolutionary process. When we're going through the first three kingdoms, it's the law of averages. It's just a normal progression, the universe, things happening. There was no conscious direction. It's just these things happen. The law of averages. He in another place had likened it to, at this place, it's a mechanical evolution. It's just the next piece follows the next piece. When we get to the humans, we get to a place where we can actually participate in evolution. This is where I have some trouble understanding this at times, because in Troward's description of this is a self-conscious where we choose to participate in evolution. So this is where we choose to do good. We make actual choices of going down road A and not leaving it to an arbitrary, whatever one comes up the most times to go down, that law of averages. We're actually making conscious choice. So this actually created a bit of chaos, because in the normal thing, one thing would seem to come right after another. It's a normal progression, but when you add in the human consciousness and this choice, things start changing faster, because we're actually choosing. We're not waiting for something to naturally occur. We're directing our consciousness into this communion with the divine and creating. So this is his point in where we're using this creative process. We're using our creative self-consciousness to move into this fifth kingdom. And I wonder, where does just our normal consciousness, because when we're in Science of Mind, what we focus on, we create. So I'm trying to figure how that relates to this self-conscious choice to go to God, because we always have our choice happening, so we're still creating. I guess the creative process happens, like in Science of Mind, to all of us, whether we're consciously thinking or not. What we think about, we create. So when we're into Troward's point of this self-conscious, we are consciously choosing what we think and aligning it with what we know as the divine principle, this power that is God, that is always into good. And I think that's the piece that we need to know, that what we're working toward is using this divine creative principle, this universal spirit, that we're on the process of entering that kingdom and being one with it.
Yeah, well, when you said the divine kingdom, automatically I thought of just the source energy or the source presence, which was there before the rock kingdom or the mineral kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm hearing is evolution is the key word. As the human consciousness kingdom evolves and opens up and becomes lightened to seeing that oneness with the divine kingdom that was there all along.
Yeah, and it's also part of that evolution, where spirit is coming into us and we're coming back to spirit, and this is where we're at in this conscious choice to make that leap, to where it speeds things up, and that's so. I guess where I'm going with that is we're getting to that place where we're becoming one with this universal creative principle, And this is what creates everything out of itself. So as we link with that, we have this additional power from this creative principle, from God, from the universe. And, I mean, let me just read this here, so it's a little easier to understand. I'm chasing my tail. So there's this universal creative principle, creates everything out of itself, which includes what we call humanity. So as we begin to understand this principle and choose this principle, we realize it is our purpose and our task to embody this principle and consciously relate to it in order to create meaningful and fulfilled lives, which results in our entry into this divine kingdom. That's one of the points that Troward made is that what we want out of life is more happiness, more joy. We want to create a better experience, a better life. And that's part of our purpose, getting to that connection with the Spirit that allows us to have that life. And that's something that we're all doing. We're all learning this process with principle. So let me get my thought here. So as we're learning this, we're all learning to use principle. We've decided we want something better, each one of us in our own way. And if we were each separate, we would be creating our own path to that. This is not where I want to go. Okay. Okay, so as we learn that in our own understanding, we bring in this power, and each of us has this power. If by chance what you wanted did not match what I wanted, we would have the same amount of power at cross purposes. So this is where what Kate was talking about earlier about being bound by principle comes in. This is saying that we are all in this one principle of God. We're bound by what God has created, principle, these basic universal laws, so that as we create and build our power and create our new life, it is within the constraints of what is the divine, what God has put into this whole arena. So when we are both in this path of this self-conscious desire to evolve and become more with God, we're both in that same arena. We're both using the same ideas and principles. We're building our power based on the same ideals. So no matter what we do, it's within this bound, so we can't come at odds with each other.
So is he still speaking dualistically? Because it sounds like from the way you're talking that he is.
I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, we're all within the one. We're individual pieces of the one, creating our lives. So I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, you're speaking dualistically as in God did this and then we did this. And so
No,
that's
there's a, not God did this, there is this, well, everything is God. It was this creation, this, I call it an arena that we have our being within. We all have different ways of expressing within that. And we're all bound we're all bound to what was initially brought into creation by Spirit. So it's not that we're separate or dualistic. We do have our individual way of expressing, but it's all within the same construct, within the same principle. Did you have?
Well, when you say principle is not bound by precedent, then if we equate principle with God created process, then principle can do whatever it wants.
No.
I'm finished. So principle is not bound by precedent, so it can do whatever it wants. We may be bound by certain laws, which could be interpreted as the precedent. And the precedents can be changed by principle, not necessarily by us. So I mean, that's what, because you were talking about we live within this,
Yeah.
that
Well,
it has certain controlling things like gravity or up or down. And
Yes,
light.
we are bound, like Kate said, we're bound by what principle has initially put there, but principle could shift
Do
the
whatever it
whole
wants.
thing at some point and shake it up on us, but so we're bound within those laws that I guess were initially part of what.
But then if you
Spirit
use our creative power that we have,
Mhm.
then you can also, one could also say, we're not bound by that precedent either. We may not be in that place yet, and maybe that's the shift into the divine kingdom that he may be headed on. And I haven't read this, so it's kind of hard to, at this stage,
Well,
kind of relate
the
to it.
divine kingdom was not part of
Okay.
this
Part
book,
of-
but it
of
was
the
part
reading.
of Troward's premises, so I wanted to bring it up. But in my mind, until we reach that divine kingdom, we still have that, I wanna call it a constraint of what God has provided that we work within. Those basic laws,
But in what Troward is saying, I don't remember the exact words he uses, but he's saying that first cause, the divine impetus that created everything, cannot work against itself. Otherwise, it would cease to exist. So there are principles that even the divine are bound to, because it cannot go contrary to its own nature. Because if it does, it will cease to exist.
Yeah.
so I think that's where, he was talking about the first,
When
the first principle.
first principle of creative process is harmony.
Harmony. It's right, we can't go against what the divine is. That would be, like I was saying, those two powers, to me, that would cancel each other or fight
Right,
against each other, and they
exactly.
can't do that. It has to be within, that positive expression of the laws that were created. But I also kind of like what Tim is saying, that this is what Spirit has emanated from itself to experience itself. But if I say Spirit can't change it up, then I'm limiting Spirit. Not that Spirit,
No.
hopefully not gonna
Okay,
do that.
precedent does not determine what we can do going forward, or what divine energy can do going forward. But it cannot, without eliminating itself, go against principle.
Right,
So-
it can't go against what it has
Mhm.
defined.
Right, and so we already are not bound by precedent, but we are bound by principle. And there's a difference. Principle and precedent are two different things.
Right, we're bound by that, by what has been created, but Tim's going out of that box into that, what I'm hearing is that the divine that has created principle, created these laws, could change it if,
As long as it doesn't go against itself.
But even if it wanted to do that, it could do that and just start all over again.
No,
I mean,
because
there is
it would
no-
just,
But you're taking away the whole principle
But
on
that-
which he
that's-
bases the rest
I
of
understand.
everything.
it's going beyond what Troward is saying. Troward is saying
Right,
that, you know, there is a universal law, universal, process, there's constraints within, within, that these laws are here and you can't go against them. But the precedent are the things that we've already done,
right.
okay, so
So I'd say
I
that,
just
you know,
lost
maybe
that.
these laws really aren't created by, maybe they were aspects of God, and that's just the way God is. And then these precedents, say, like the law of gravity, you know, well, maybe our perception is that we cannot, you know, beat the law of gravity, but people talk about levitating, and, you know, maybe it's just working within those universal laws, and our perception is they're violating those laws, in reality, it's just our perception that they're being violated.
But and the thing is we don't
Precedent
know,
tells us they're
we
violated.
don't know what they all are.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's part of our growing awareness has allowed us to shift our understanding of these laws, because there are places where gravity is not in effect. So we have learned other things. I think that there's so much underlying what is principle that that's what allows us to bring in those ideas that we haven't already thought of. It's like we knew about trains, but we didn't know about planes. We knew, it took us a while to figure out how a boat would float, because, you know, dispersing the volume, we didn't know those things.
Right.
Those are all, I mean, I can't imagine what other stuff is out there.
Right.
And that's part of opening our minds to possibility and what the divine has, and letting go of our attachment that gravity is all there is. You know, maybe there's, I think it would be, I mean, I guess birds don't defy gravity. They use gravity to stay within that plane, but I don't know what would,
Well,
Call it
planes to
precedent.
some extent defy gravity.
yeah,
I mean, if you look at the construction of a plane and the weight of it and all of that, you would think, how in the world could that fly? It's so heavy, but they use creative ideas of aerodynamics that allow it to fly.
yeah.
Those are new ideas based on principle.
Right.
That's his whole thing,
Because
is
he's
that,
saying there's two kinds of ideas.
right,
The first kind derives from the pre-existing conditions or reasoning from secondary causation, material effect. So those ideas, you know, I think those are the thing, it's like making a better engine or something, maybe, as opposed to, we have the mechanical engine, and then we came up with the idea of waves, you know, things going through the air where we communicate, that run things, you know, because that's the second kind derives directly from unseen spirit, reasoning directly from spiritual cause. So that's when we get our ideas, when we're tapping into principle.
Can you
Those
repeat
are-
that second one again, please?
The second kind is, it derives directly from unseen spirit, reasoning directly from spiritual cause. So there's that, the idea from what's already been here and then allowing that creativity, that expression that is spirit to come through and align things in new ways where we come up with the new process. So,
That's what it's called, inspiration.
yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so another, do we have a good handle on principal and president, or is there, I know I've chased it around. I think with Troy, principal is first cause, spirit, and precedent is what we've already manifested or created or what we know. So we open up to first cause, and then we can expand, we can really begin to create.
So does that include all the new ideas that have come along since then? You know, like the whole quantum field is, you know, something entirely different that he knew nothing about.
Right, and it goes right along with what he's
With-
talking about.
Yeah, that it's all progression and that we're not, we don't know it all, we haven't defined it all. And we're just, yeah, evolution, that we're, you know, continually expanding.
Mhm. And that's the evolution that's made possible because we are self-conscious and choosing to actually listen and let these ideas from spirit come through us. That's where they came up with these new ideas, although they did have some inkling of the physics part, you know, in the last century, like around when Troy was there, because they were already talking about some of it. But that's the piece, it's we keep moving and finding new ways to use this, what's already here, in new ways. I can't think of any other way to go. It's just opening up to those ideas that come in that would have sounded totally wacko and out of context at different points, but as we build on each other, because part of that precedent is everything that's come before. So we have this basis and we can continue to build it, but I think that builds things slowly. I mean, that's my opinion. But when we let the divine in, that's when we get these quantum leaps and someone comes up with some totally new idea. I mean, what happened that gave us the computers that were totally foreign and the spaceships? I think that's part of that divine creative. It's all the creative process, letting the divine in and consciously going with it. And one of the other ideas that he talks about is jumping here to matter, because it comes into play as we go through the book, understanding what matter is. These are the things that we're creating. Trower doesn't believe that they're an illusion. He believes that matter is real. It is what was projected out of the universal creative process that gives us all we have here. I know I'm kind of, okay. And this matter is important for us to create. We have to have this emanation of spirit to be able to create. There's a process that we go through that creates, and we learn from that and go back into spirit. But part of the thing of matter is it's all here. It goes along with that we're all one. And that we are perceiving all of this because of that universal spirit that has created this matter. If it was an illusion, what would happen? If I quit looking at it, wouldn't it disappear?
Well, they're saying that, the observation is controlling, whether like certain things are either a wave or a particle. So observation becomes different. Our understanding of observation now is much different than when Trollard did.
And when Trollard looks at it, he looks at it that this stuff stays here because Source, the universal creative power, has created it, projected it, and perceives it. So keeps this basic thing in form for us that we can use what is here to create more. If it was all our individual understanding of matter, we would all have to be thinking about it all the time to keep this building here. I don't have time to do that.
You would have time for nothing else.
Yeah, we would just poof, be gone. So in Trollard, he has this base that's what part of what that universal principle does is creates this place. I think of it as we have this place to play in, to be able to expand and be more and create a better life, because God gave us the opportunity and keeps these principles, these creations within the one mind that keeps it here with us so that we can use it to learn more and grow more. If there wasn't some underlying universal presence that kept that perspective, we would have nothing to work with. We wouldn't have,
That sounds a little bit dualistic, but if we each are individual points of that divine spirit, we can still work with that matter, but with our observation and such. We have that
yeah, but
power.
would we able, still the same concept. There is this one unifying presence that keeps this matter here where we connect and continue to create and evolve and bring more into our lives. I just thought that was a cool concept, from way back. It's like, well, I want to be one of those guys, and then I go, yeah, maybe not. Might get boring after a while. I gotta just keep this. So, any questions on what we talked about? I know we were round and round.
I won't get way off of it, that there's this concept and some evidence that we live in a simulated universe in which maybe all of this, what we call matter, is actually being simulated as like a computer system. And that's we know this coming out from a lot of different, enlightened individuals.
Yeah, that first quote by Holmes, I took half of it from Trollard and then I made it up, because it's all made up, so it could be. We don't know for sure, and that's why we keep coming up with new concepts that this idea might lead to something else that'll totally shift our perspective.
It's like all those sci-fi movies that have these people doing all this stuff, and then there's this huge, conglomerate that's actually monitoring and causing the effect of what they're doing. So it's like, that's just eerie to
Yeah.
think about.
It's like Men in Black when it ended and
Right.
that universe was on him, and there were big old strange looking creatures playing marbles with it. and there's our weather, you know? Who knows what the full thing is that's why we choose what resonates with us, and we use these practices and principles and ideas that Troward came up with, that Ernest Holm expounds, to be able to create what we want here.
Right.
You know, it's I can't tell you what the truth is. I wish I knew. But I like what I believe, and it works for me, and it works within this creative process with Troward, so it's a good thing. So, any other comments or questions? What I would suggest, if you get a chance, read the first chapter, look through the questions. The questions that are here for the first chapter, a lot of the answers are right in the starting point that is in there. It really explains some of it. And you get more depth when you go to the actual pages. And then read chapter 2 and look through the questions to be able to come back and tell us
And
what
discuss.
we didn't see.
See how we can, look at it from our own creative thought.
So this class is on a love offering basis, so we'll do our love offering. And what I know is that everything is the divine in each one of us. This prosperity that we have, this wonderful mind that we have, the questions, the answers, they're all in the divine. They all come through our hearts to our minds, coming out in our own concepts, coming out in ways that we embrace and enhance each other. And I know that we are all blessed in our wonderful expressions of life. In all areas we are abundant. And I know that each of us go into our life with this abundance, creating it in everything we are. I'm so grateful for this time, for this place, for the abundance that is in my life, in my knowing, in my curiosity. I feel blessed and I'm so grateful. And I know that as I state this truth that we are all abundant, it is so, and God has made it so, that universal mind right here, right now. And so it is.
And so